On the 21st of September, 1930, a man died in an upstairs room of a plain brick farmhouse in Cinnaminson, New Jersey. His own wife had described the house as very ugly. 4 days earlier, he had sat down in a chair to be shaved and suffered an embolism. He never woke up. 15 miles west, across the state line, stood the house where his family actually lived. 51 rooms, 26 servants to run it. He had spent the last 5 years of his life insisting that the ugly farmhouse was his real home. He was lying. The lie was worth millions of dollars. And it failed. His name was John Thompson Dorrance. He invented condensed soup. He had walked into the Camden Cannery in October of 1897 at 24, holding a doctorate from Göttingen and standing offers from 4 colleges. He took $7.50 a week, and his uncle made him buy his own laboratory equipment. 33 years later, he owned every single share of the Campbell Soup Company, and a fortune of $115 million, worth roughly $2.3 billion today. He wrote 6 versions of his will and attached 9 codicils to them. He left nothing to charity. Not $1. He left his family everything, down to the gasoline sitting in the family cars. Within a year of his death, 2 states would each hand his executors a bill for the same fortune, and the Supreme Court of the United States would twice refuse to hear him. 60 years later, his grandchildren would threaten to sell the company out from under one another, and one grandson would walk into an embassy building in Dublin, sign a single page, and stop being an American. This is the story of the soup fortune. What it built, what it broke, and the price of a man who could not stop trying to outrun the tax collector. If you enjoy these deep dives into old money history, press the join button below and become a channel member. It really helps us keep making these documentaries. Alright, let us begin where the family actually lived. The house sits on a wooded ridge in Radnor, Pennsylvania, 15 miles from the center of Philadelphia. 3 stories of grey stone in the Elizabethan Tudor Revival style. 51 rooms. It was designed by Horace Trumbauer, the architect the Philadelphia rich hired when they wanted to be taken seriously. It was not built for a soup man. It went up around 1900 for James William Paul Jr., a managing partner at Drexel and Company who had married into the Drexel family. That mattered more than the stonework. When the Dorrances arrived 25 years later, they were not building a house. They were buying somebody else's proof of belonging. 26 servants ran the place, 16 of them inside the house. Remember that number. In 5 years' time, a Pennsylvania courtroom is going to count those servants one by one, and the count is going to cost the family more than any household staff in American history. The parties there became a fixture of the mainline calendar. One family friend recalled that the Dorrances always had the best orchestra and the best food, and that nobody ever refused an invitation. The man who paid for all of it hated being inside it. A friend named Theodore Grayson later recounted Dorrance's response to a compliment on the new house. "I don't like this damned place. I feel as though I were a bug under a glass case in a museum when I am in it." He was extravagant and stingy in the same breath, and the staff absorbed both. He was so irritated by the electricity bills that he threatened to have the light bulbs removed from the servants' quarters. Butlers paid to have their own clothes washed in the house laundry and got 2 uniform shirts a year as Christmas gifts. To understand how a chemist earning $7.50 a week came to own a house he could not stand, go back to a factory floor in Camden. He was born in Bristol, Pennsylvania in 1873. He took a degree in chemical engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a doctorate in organic chemistry at Göttingen. When he finished, 4 institutions were trying to recruit him: Columbia, Cornell, Bryn Mawr, and Göttingen itself. He turned all 4 down to go work in a cannery that made jam. His uncle, Arthur Dorrance, had become a partner in a business started in 1869 by Joseph Campbell, a fruit merchant, and Abram Anderson, an icebox manufacturer, and had replaced Campbell as president. He did not want to hire his nephew. He thought the young man too much the scholar, not the sort who would be content packing fruit and vegetables for the rest of his life. The nephew kept asking. Eventually he was given a bare laboratory, $7.50 a week, and a condition he would equip that laboratory at his own expense. The idea had come from eating dinner in Europe, where soup appeared at every table and was nutritious and cheap to make. In America, it was neither. Prepared soup came in large, heavy cans and sold for around 30 cents for 32 ounces, which meant most families kept it for formal meals. The problem was not the soup. The problem was the water. Water is the heaviest thing in a can of soup and the least valuable. Take most of it out during cooking and the can shrinks, the shipping cost collapses, and the price to the customer falls through the floor. Dorrance's target was a can of 10.5 ounces sold for a dime. He had the process working inside a year. His uncle raised him from $7.50 to $9 a week. Consider what that dime actually did. Before Dorrance, canned soup had to be carted around the country as mostly water, at 1890s freight rates. After him, one railcar carried roughly 3 times the servings for the same haulage. That is not a better product. That is a different business. One where a national brand becomes possible for the first time, because you can now ship a can from Camden to Kansas and still sell it for 10 cents. It did not sell at first. Americans did not trust a product that cheap. So the chemist became an advertiser, which was not a thing chemists did. He spent $4,264 covering trolley cars with advertising cards. In 1900, Campbell's Soups took a gold medal at the Exposition Universelle in Paris, and the medal went onto the label, where a version of it survives today. In 1904 came the Campbell Kids. The red and white label itself is generally credited to Dorrance. At his insistence, the company phased out everything that was not soup. Pork and beans survived for one reason: the line needed something to run on the days the beef stock was being made. Meanwhile, he was buying stock with every dollar he had, and here the story turns quietly ugly. Arthur Dorrance had hired his nephew reluctantly, paid him almost nothing, and made him fund his own laboratory. Now that nephew held the formulas, the cooking times, the reduction ratios, the tomato varieties. None of it was locked in a safe. All of it was in his head. The word inside the business, according to accounts collected decades later, was that the family understood their position perfectly. If he walked out and opened a competing kitchen, he would take the entire product line with him, and their shares would be worth nothing. They were not selling to him. They were being emptied by him, politely, one block of stock at a time. He became general manager in 1910. When Arthur retired in 1914, the nephew became president. On the 3rd of June, 1915, he bought the last of his uncle's shares. Within the family, it was believed he paid around $5 million in total for a company he had made valuable himself. The uncle, who thought he was too much of a scholar, had just sold him everything. Ethel Mallinckrodt Dorrance had never liked the farm. She called the brick house in Cinnaminson very ugly but very comfortable inside, which is the sort of compliment that ends a marriage argument in her favor. Her reasons were social. She wanted her younger children in private schools with children who had their prospects in life, and her older daughters presented to society properly and married well. The main line had the schools, the clubs, and the families she needed. Her husband did not want to go. He liked sitting at a desk in Camden in the morning and tending the tomato patch by his own front door in the afternoon. He did not sail yachts. He did not hunt foxes or racehorses. He gave almost nothing away. He also had a second reason, and it was the one that would outlive him. New Jersey's tax treatment suited what he had begun planning for his own death. There was a further problem in Pennsylvania law, explained later by his lawyers in open court. A Pennsylvania widow was entitled to 1/3 of her husband's personal property, considerably more than he intended to leave his wife. Satisfying that claim might mean selling Campbell shares, and selling shares was the one outcome he had organized his entire life to prevent. Ethel won. The compromise they reached was a fiction, and both of them signed it. They bought Woodcrest in 1925 for roughly $350,000 and spent $465,000 more on renovation. On the 14th of November, the entire contents of the New Jersey house were carted to Radnor. Days later, Eleanor made her debut in Silver Lace and Cascading Orchids. Within months, the Dorrances were in the social register alongside the Vanderbilts, the Dukes, and the Biddles. The staff at the farm dropped from 10 to 4. The staff at Woodcrest rose to 26. And from that day, John Dorrance told anyone who would listen that his home was Pomona Farm in Cinnaminson. He executed formal documents declaring a New Jersey domicile. He voted there. He kept his church rolls there. He had his wife sign a statement agreeing that their legal residence was New Jersey. He kept it up for 4 years and 10 months while sleeping and eating and entertaining 15 miles away in another state. The most expensive lie in American estate law had begun. The Dorrances spent money the way people spend it when they have only recently acquired it and are not yet certain it will be respected. In 1927, Dorrance paid $100,000 for a coming-out party for his daughter Ethel, known in the family as Fifi. He took over the Bellevue Stratford Hotel in Philadelphia and had it turned into a tropical fantasy, complete with cages of exotic birds and monkeys. 2 bands played until dawn, and one of them is said to have featured an unknown young singer named Bing Crosby. In the summer of 1929, when the family began holidaying at Bar Harbor in Maine, he hired the bandleader Howard Lannin for the entire season. The 9-piece band cost $43,000. Lannin later recalled the explanation he was given. "No one knows me up there, so I thought if I brought you along it would be a way to meet people." When a neighbor, an heiress of the Pulitzer family, asked whether she might borrow the band, Lannin said he would have to ask permission. The answer came back immediately: "Go play for her, but charge her." That was the man entire. $43,000 on an orchestra to meet strangers, and 2 shirts a year for the butlers. His daughters were followed by reporters everywhere, because the size of the eventual inheritance was public knowledge. Eleanor's decision to take a job as a Campbell clerk for 31 cents an hour became a national story, and the papers celebrated her as the debutante laborer. She lasted 3 months, sailed for Europe, and came back engaged to a New York investment banker. That was the family in miniature. A gesture towards ordinary life, abandoned before it cost anything. They were new money, and the older Philadelphia families did not let them forget it. Underneath all that glamour, one friend said, was a lot of misery. By 1929, his health was failing. Lannin remembered a line the richest man in the room delivered in Maine: "Howard, I have $40 million in a bank in Boston, and I'd give it to anyone who could make me feel better." Nobody could. There was one piece of business left, and he had been rewriting it for years. He wrote 6 versions of his will and attached 9 codicils. The final document ran 28 pages, and every clause was engineered around one fear: that his heirs would be forced to sell Campbell stock to pay a tax bill, and the company would slip out of the family's hands. His solution was to skip a generation. His widow and children would receive the income from the estate, all of it, for the rest of their lives, but ownership of the shares would pass to his grandchildren. His children would be rich and powerless. Their children would inherit the company, free of tax. The income was divided by rank. His son, John Jr., known as Jack, would receive 1/4 of the estate's income, the same share as his mother. Each of the 4 daughters received 1/8. Jack's allowance alone came to $20,000 a month in a country about to enter the Great Depression. And when the next generation inherited, Jack's children as a group would receive double the stock allotted to any one of his sister's children. The instructions to his son were written into the document. He desired that his son be given the opportunity to learn the business and to demonstrate his ability to hold a position of trust. A sale should be considered only after the greatest deliberation, and if a sale ever happened, the family was to retain at least 52% of the combined company. Where other men of his generation endowed hospitals and libraries, Dorrance endowed only Dorrances. Nothing went to charity. A nephew, David Dorrance, described the thinking without much softening. He wanted mirrors that would throw back his own image. Even the mausoleum at West Laurel Hill Cemetery was restricted to people carrying the surname. On the 15th of September, 1930, the family came home early from Maine because he was seriously ill. He went to the farmhouse. The children went to Woodcrest. 6 days later, he was dead at 56. He had spent a decade making the fortune impossible to tax. The taxmen had been reading too. The question was simple, and there was no safe answer to it. Whichever state he was domiciled in could tax the intangible property, meaning the stocks and bonds that made up almost the entire fortune. The trap was that his estate could not argue both, and both states asked. Pennsylvania moved first and moved hard. In April of 1931, its appraiser valued the estate at just under $200 million. An aggressive figure later revised down towards the accepted $115 million, and assessed a tax of more than $31 million on it. The executors appealed to the Orphans' Court of Delaware County. The trial that followed was extraordinary theater for a country in the second year of the Depression. Newspapers that gave their front pages to breadlines gave their inside pages to the Dorrances. The estate's argument was that Radnor had been occasional, a convenience for the children's schooling, and that the true home had always been the farm. To break it, Pennsylvania did not argue law. It counted things. It counted servants. 16 indoors at Woodcrest and another 10 to 12 on the grounds, against 4 at the farm he called home, down from 10 before the move. It established that in November of 1925, the family's entire personal effects had been removed from Cinnaminson to Radnor, which is not what a family does when it is going somewhere temporarily. It counted the school runs, the social calendar, the daily commute to Camden. Then it went through the bills. A grieving Ethel Dorrance, dressed in black, sat in open court and explained how one of the butlers had run up grocery bills of more than $400 a month. The family produced jewelry receipts and salon bills for manicures. Every ordinary transaction of the household became evidence of where that household actually was, read into the record while the country queued for relief. Judge John B. Hannum ruled for the family. Pennsylvania appealed, and on the 26th of September 1932, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania reversed him. The reasoning became a landmark estate lawyers still teach. A man's declarations about where he intends to live cannot override where he demonstrably lives. Conduct beats paperwork. The United States Supreme Court declined to take the case. The estate paid Pennsylvania, and then the tax collectors of New Jersey, who had sat silent through every day of it, walked in and presented their own bill. The executors had just spent 2 years arguing in public at enormous expense that John Dorrance was a New Jersey resident. New Jersey agreed with them. The estate protested, and the appeal reached the United States Supreme Court, which declined again. 2 states had now taxed one dead man's intangible property in full, on directly contradictory findings, and no federal court would resolve it. Reported figures vary between the court records and the estate records reviewed later by the Philadelphia Inquirer. The Inquirer's reconstruction puts the Pennsylvania payment at about $17.4 million and the New Jersey payment at $16,811,000 for a combined bill of just over $34 million. Roughly $3 in every 10 went to two governments that could not both have been right. Soup covered it. By 1938, the estate had grown to $127 million, and a young man at Princeton was preparing to inherit an instruction. Jack Dorrance was 11 when his father died, and he later described the man he had barely known as the hero of his life. Carry on what I started. Work for the company. Do not sell the business. Do not lose control. Yes, sir, the war intervened. He served with the Office of Strategic Services, the wartime forerunner of the CIA, in southern China, and married a Missouri debutante in 1943. His mother wore black to the wedding. When he reported to Campbell in 1946, personnel did not know what to do with the owner's son, so they put him on the factory floor, reviewing hourly wage rates. Then came a succession of postings as assistant to 4 different executives, a 14-year apprenticeship carrying no management responsibility whatsoever. That was not an accident. His father had specified it, having watched too many empires collapse in the hands of heirs. Jack understood the job as custody rather than command. He arrived at 8, tasted soup, and concerned himself with details, such as making sure a piece of pork always sat at the top of a can of pork and beans. A former Campbell chief executive put it plainly: the family had nothing to do with the operation of the business. Nothing. Where his father had built the thing, Jack guarded it. A confidante said the company was his religion. A cousin said the terror of him must have been that he would somehow spoil his heritage. His marriage ended in divorce in 1963. His wife moved to Switzerland with the children, and his 2 sons were estranged from him for years afterwards. He chaired the Campbell Soup Company from 1962 to 1984 and died of a heart attack on the 9th of April, 1989, at 70. He controlled about 31% of the company through his father's trust, and his will split it 3 ways: 10.5% each to John III, to Bennett, and to Mary Alice. He had held the line for 40 years. It broke within 18 months of his funeral. On the 28th of December, 1990, 3 branches of the founder's grandchildren, the Norrises, the Hamiltons and the Van Burens, announced publicly that they wanted to sell their combined 17.4% and called for the whole company to be put up for sale. Jack's 3 children, holding 31% between them, refused. 60 years of a dead man's instructions had come down to 9 cousins arguing. The truce that eventually held was built around hiring a new chief executive rather than any agreement between the families. And the loudest voice for keeping the company in Dorrance's hands belonged to the eldest son. His name was John T. Dorrance III, and everyone called him Ippy. He had been a difficult child, the one who once lit a fire on the floor of the family's formal living room rather than in the fireplace. He grew into an intensely private adult who spent 15 years on a Wyoming ranch. When the trust dissolved on his father's death, it held more than 40 million Campbell shares, split 3 ways, and the stock closed that week at $38.25. His third was worth roughly $500 million. He also inherited the problem his grandfather had spent 6 wills trying to solve. The founder had arranged for his grandchildren to receive the stock without tax. But that generation was now aging, and when they died, their own children would face a bill payable only by selling Campbell shares. The trap the old man built to protect the family had a timer on it, and the timer was running out. His grandfather's answer had been to change his address by 15 miles. This answer was more thorough. In the early 1990s, Ireland ran a naturalization scheme for foreign investors. He put more than $1.5 million towards planting trees across 1,000 acres of Irish land, and a grateful Irish government issued him a passport. Then he walked into the cylindrical American Embassy building in Dublin and signed a single page. The oath is one sentence long. He absolutely and entirely renounced his United States nationality, together with all rights and privileges and all duties of allegiance and fidelity. He swore fidelity to Ireland at a brief hearing before an Irish judge, and it was done. There was no drama to it. He had transferred the Wyoming ranch to his sons the year before and could still visit it. He could still fly to Camden for board meetings, where he remained a director. Nothing in his life required him to be American except the tax code. In September of 1996, he began selling. The Inquirer reported at least $244 million of Campbell stock gone by that month, and by November, the total was reported at around $720 million. Critics put the estate taxes he was walking away from in the hundreds of millions. He was not alone, only conspicuous. In 1993, more than 300 people formally renounced American citizenship, and Forbes gave the wealthy ones among them a name that stuck: the New Refugees. Congress noticed. The expatriation tax rules were tightened in 1996, again in 2004, and again in 2008. In each case aimed squarely at people doing what he had done. The founder had built an entire legal architecture to stop his family selling stock to the government. His grandson solved the same problem by resigning from the country. Drive out King of Prussia Road in Radnor today, and the house is still there, on its ridge, behind the trees. The estate's administrators sold Woodcrest to the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus in 1953, and the nuns used it first as an orphanage. In September of 1957, Cabrini College opened on the grounds, and the mansion served as its administration building for the next 67 years. Then Cabrini ran out of money and closed in 2024. Villanova University took the campus that June, spent more than $100 million on it, and reopened it. The old stable block is a student center now. The mansion was kept. The family did not hold together as well as the building did. The revolt of 1990 was settled, but never really resolved. In 2018, the hedge fund Third Point ran a proxy campaign against the board, and one of the heirs, George Strawbridge Jr., joined the attack on his own cousins, saying they had been complacent. In November of 2024, shareholders voted to drop the word soup from the corporate name. The business a chemist built by taking water out of soup is now called the Campbell's Company, and sells more crackers and pasta sauce than the thing he invented. You can drive the whole story in an afternoon. The head office in Camden, where it has stood since 1869. Cinnaminson, where a man once told a court, through his lawyers, that he lived. Then, west across the river to the 51 rooms where he actually slept, now full of undergraduates. He was right about the soup. Taking the water out was one of the great commercial ideas of the American century, and the red and white can is still on the shelf. He was wrong about nearly everything he tried to control afterwards. He could not choose his own domicile. He could not stop 2 states taking $3 in every 10. He could not make his grandchildren want what he wanted. The label stayed. The family left, although there is an argument on the other side, and I would like to hear yours. The company is still standing, still in Camden, still carrying his label, and his descendants still sit on its board. Most fortunes of that era are gone entirely. So did his plan fail, or did it work exactly as designed and simply cost more than he expected? Tell me in the comments, and if you made it this far, subscribing genuinely helps these documentaries keep getting made.